So, Your Excellency Ambassador Dan Mulhall, thank you again for coming to the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy and for the excellent lecture you gave. I'd love to ask you just a few follow-up questions to go a little deeper into some of the issues. The first one is with youth development. You mentioned that in your lecture. I think Ireland has been particularly hard hit by the Eurozone crisis and the youth employment rates are quite high. What is the Irish government doing to help these people, and how is it adapting to the harsh conditions with regards to youth development and employment?
Well, of course, we have a young population, which is an advantage in most circumstances. But during a recession, of course, unemployment becomes a problem. And you're right to say that we have an unemployment rate now of 14% across the economy and of maybe 25% among young people. And it's also true that many young Irish people are now emigrating, we hope temporarily, to places like Australia and Canada. So it's extremely important for Ireland, but also for the whole of Europe, that Europe doesn't become identified in the minds of our young people as a problem continent, as a place where there's no future. We have to generate hope for the future. And that's why, during our presidency, we have focused on what's called the Youth Guarantee. The Youth Guarantee has been agreed during our presidency, and it will be rolled out over the next period of time. And the Youth Guarantee means that every European under 25 will have a guarantee of a job, an internship, a traineeship, or something that will prepare them and give them hope for the future. And that's a very important part of our presidency, to focus on specifically on youth unemployment, because that's where the problem really lies. The problem is not that masses people have lost their jobs, some have. The problem is that we're not creating jobs for the new generation of Irish people coming onto the labour market every year. And that's why we're also focusing on exploiting the full potential of the European single market. The single market has transformed Ireland. Ireland's boom years started the same time as the European single market started. And we now need to take the single market to the next level so that we can create further growth and further employment for our young people. That's why we've also focused on the digital economy, because we believe that young people have a particular facility in the digital economy. And that's why we believe that this sector of our economy can provide part of the solution for the future tackling youth unemployment. But there's no silver bullet, there's no simple solution. It's going to take time. We need to focus on the task at hand, which is generating the growth and jobs that young people need to have hope for the future.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I completely agree. I mean, we definitely think that the digital age and stuff, it's becoming ever more and more important. And now, just from personal experience, I'm Irish expat myself. A lot of young people have recently left Ireland. I mean, I know there's a huge amount of us here in Berlin, and as well, they've gone to other places such as Canada, Australia. When you mentioned in your talk about the gathering, I was just thinking, are you going to be targeting young people like us in these areas, or are you maybe focusing more on the traditional, like Irish diaspora, such as America?
Absolutely. Young people, we want to connect. We want the gathering to connect Ireland with our diaspora. The Irish-born, people of Irish descent, and people who identify with Ireland for whatever reason. Maybe because they have a house in Ireland or a business in Ireland or whatever. We want to connect with them. And we now have increasing numbers of young Irish people abroad, which we didn't have maybe 10 years ago, when most young Irish people were staying at home. Now we have them, and therefore we must connect with young Irish people. And maybe I could challenge you to come up with a gathering yourself. Why not organise a gathering here? Yeah, Tourism Ireland would be delighted to help and come up with an idea, because the gathering is essentially, what happened with the gathering was that our tourism board went around the country. They had town hall meetings in small towns and villages all over the country. And people came up with ideas for a gathering. For example, one that I really tickled my fancy was a village in County Cavan, I think it was. I'm not quite sure, I think it was County Cavan, which produced the first ever fully qualified female vet. They're having a gathering of female vets from all over the world.
That's a great idea.
To commemorate the fact that the first person in this profession came from a village in Ireland. So there's any number of ideas you could have for a gathering. A gathering can be anything. It can be going for a stag party. It can be going for a golfing holiday. It can be going to visit some attraction in Ireland, or you can plug into one of the thousands of events that are being organised throughout Ireland during this year.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it myself. I think it's a great initiative. And then moving on, you're for the European Union and the current EU presidency. You're sharing the 18-month term with Greece and Lithuania, is it? And I also saw that the EU the cultural campaign is taking place. They've got special events in Paris, Brussels, and Berlin. And I was just wondering, are you doing anything with the other two, with Greece and Lithuania? And are you maybe using cultural diplomacy?
Yes.
With these?
Yes. We had an event here in Berlin at the end of January, and the theme for that event was a simple one, that Lithuania, Greece and Ireland, can you imagine any other three countries in Europe that are so varied? Geographically, they come from different parts of the continent, but even in terms of their culture, you've got a Baltic Sea country with a northeastern European culture, but a very strong traditional culture. You have the Greeks with their own strong Mediterranean tradition, and you have the Irish with their Atlantic culture, their Celtic culture. So we had an event where we had traditional Lithuanian singers singing wonderfully evocative Lithuanian songs. We had Greek dancers doing regional dances from Greece, and we had Irish dancers, all of whom came from Berlin, but they were doing wonderful Irish dancing. So it was a way of illustrating the variety of Europe, because our three countries perfectly epitomise Europe's variety.
That's really interesting. I think as well the different dances and stuff is really what the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy is really all about. Then moving on, as a whole, does the Irish population share the current anti-integration sentiment of the UK towards the EU? And if not, how does this affect the bilateral relations with the UK?
Well, the attitude to Europe in Ireland remains very positive. Now, I'm not saying it hasn't been affected by the crisis, because how could you have a crisis like this and it have no effect on attitudes? It doesn't make sense. So it has had an effect on attitudes. And people are maybe a little bit more sober in their analysis of Europe at the moment, and maybe more inclined to sort of weigh up positives and negatives and unbalance and so forth. But however, if you look at the hard facts, last year we had a referendum on the fiscal treaty. In the depths of the biggest recession in Irish history. What happened? 60% of those who voted yes.
Yeah.
When it would have been very easy for people to say, I'm going to vote no because I want to protest about the way the economy is going or about Europe or whatever. No, 60% voted yes. We have a remarkable record of voting in favour of a succession of European treaties. Everyone remembers the 2 no votes in Ireland. Nobody remembers the 7 positive yes votes, right? Second point is that in January there was an opinion poll. Asked people, do you think Ireland should be a member of the European Union? 85% said yes. Has Ireland benefited from EU membership? 83% said yes. These are very, very high figures. No other country could hardly dream of those figures, really. I mean, they're among the highest in Europe. It's not to say there isn't a degree of disappointment with the European Union, a degree of disenchantment but we don't have that Eurosceptical tradition that other countries have developed. There's no political party in Europe campaigning against Europe. There's no significant body of political opinion that says Ireland should leave the European Union.
You don't have like the UKIP.
When people were asked the question, if Britain were to leave the European Union, what should Ireland do? 69% said we should stay in the EU, which is a pretty high figure considering how geographically close we are and how connected we are with the UK in many ways.
I think it's great to hear. I wasn't aware of those figures, and I actually think that the current anti-EU sentiment in the UK is a great shame. I think they're really blinkering themselves.
It's not for us to lecture anybody else about what they want to do with their country, right? But all we can say is that our experience of Europe has been on the whole, very, very positive. It has helped to transform Ireland from a relatively underdeveloped economy in the 1950s to even today, despite the problems of the crisis, as still a relatively, a very well-developed and prosperous economy. Look at the infrastructure in Ireland, which is now up to European standards. In the past, it wasn't like that.
Certainly gotten a lot better.
So we have caught up with the rest of Europe in very many areas, and that's a positive thing. And we've done this, I think, without losing our own traditional values. I mean, for example, in Ireland, traditional music is still a genuinely popular art form. In most European countries, it's not. It's for tourists. In Ireland, it's played by Irish people for their own benefit. We have our own national games that are the most popular games in Ireland. No other country in Europe has that situation. So we do cling on to traditional values. I like to think we combine those traditional values with a strong contemporary, vibrant contemporary culture. And I always say to people in Germany, you know, one night you can go to an Irish pub in an Irish town and listen to wonderful traditional music. The next night, next door, you can go to a pub and you can listen to wonderful rock music. And that's the great... And Irish people don't see any distinction between enjoying traditional music and enjoying rock music. Why not?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's one of the things I love about Ireland. But you did mention the traditional aspect, and as it is International Women's Day today, Irish society has said to be a bit maybe traditional when it comes to gender roles and women's rights and things like that. Do you think that cultural diplomacy can help overcome such stereotypes and change mindsets towards gender equality, both within Ireland and maybe what people from outside of Ireland think of it?
Of course, there's much work to be done in various areas of Irish society in providing opportunities for everyone and providing the kind of, or creating the kind of caring, tolerant society that I mentioned and that President Higgins spoke about in his inaugural address. But enormous progress has been made in various areas of our social development over the last number of years, and a very good sign of this was we had 2 presidents elected. So for 21 years we had women presidents, both of whom were elected with large majorities. And that, I think, is a sign that and that of course makes a big impression, because I can remember being in Brussels when President Robinson was elected, and our neighbours actually knocked on our door to say how wonderful it was that Ireland, this traditional country that they had always thought of as being somewhat less developed than Belgium, had elected by popular vote, you know, a woman with who's a law professor and a well-known campaigner for human rights and liberal causes. So a country has changed enormously in my time, certainly. I've seen the changes. It's probably less obvious to you because you maybe didn't experience the country as it was before. But all countries in Europe have been transformed over the last 40 years. Probably Ireland has undergone more transformation than almost anywhere else in the world, because we were, I mean, for example, if you read the works of Heinrich Böll, the great German writer who went to Ireland in the 1950s, and he wrote this great book, The Irish Journal, or the Irisches Tagebuch.
Yeah.
And his book presents Ireland as a kind of a completely separate part of Europe, totally cut off from the rest of Europe. That's not the case now. The Irish are now Europeans, but we have our own traditions as well, and that's a good thing. It's nice to have the tradition and the modernity and the contemporary vitality combined together.
Yeah, I think, and that is what makes Ireland what it is. And now finally, just looking at nation branding, Ireland is an extremely popular tourist destination. To what extent are efforts made to ensure that the heavy tourism is carried out in a sustainable manner? And does ecotourism form part of Ireland's nation branding strategy?
Well, for example, just to go in another area, if I may, for a moment, the food industry. We have this brand now called Origin Green. And the idea is to build on the idea, and it's a sustainable food production brand. And we're pushing that out very strongly because we recognize that all over the world, people not only want to eat good food, but they want to know that this food is being produced in a sustainable way, because they don't want to contribute to problems down the road. So this Origin Green is a very important brand for Ireland, for Irish food, but it also makes economic sense because it'll probably help to sustain our exports of food, both in terms of being able to keep producing the exports, but also in the acceptability of those exports in other countries, where this kind of branding is important. And Germany is a good example of that. On tourism, there's always this, I suppose, tension between, why do people want to come to Ireland? They want to come because they like the landscape, the friendliness of the people, and so forth, the culture. Obviously, we want to have more tourists because it generates employment and it brings down our unemployment rate, and in particular, it maybe creates employment for young people because young people tend to be probably more heavily represented in the tourism industry because it's summer work and they tend to be available to work and so on. So it's very important from the point of view of economic development. And you've always got to make sure that you don't do anything which will create future problems and make your tourist product less attractive. Somebody said to me at the ITB during the week, look, don't build too many big attractions. Let people enjoy what they want to enjoy, which is the natural beauty of the country, rather than festooning it with... However, you do have to, and this is what we've done in the last 20 years, I would say, we have transformed the product.
Yeah.
Firstly, the hotels are now better. They're better value, by the way, than almost anywhere in Europe these days. Second, definitely, I can tell you that from my own experience. Irish hotels are now high quality and the price is very competitive by European standards. Second change we've made is in terms of food quality. 30 years ago, people tell me, I remember myself coming back with visitors from abroad, it was not that easy to find good places to eat. Now they're everywhere.
I've heard this story.
So now, so you can't, I don't think today's tourists would want to go to a country where you couldn't have a decent meal. So from that point of view, I think we have developed our product quite significantly. But I don't think, we're never going to have the massive resorts of the Costa del Sol or the Canaries. We're just never going to have that kind of tourism, nor should we try to have it because it would actually damage our product. So I think that with our countryside, we can develop our tourism sensibly, and ecotourism is an important part of our tourism strategy moving forward. But there is a balance to be struck. You can't, if people want to come to an Ireland that's like the Ireland of Heinrich Bull, sorry, most Irish people do not want to live in that kind of island. So you've got to preserve the image we have, while at the same time ensuring that our society provides people with the amenities that modern tourists and modern citizens of a country like Ireland want to have.
Yeah, and I, again, completely agree. And thank you very much.
You're very kind. It was a pleasure to be here. Pleasure.
Very well.
Thank you very much.